Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Grantharāji ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 12, Rahugana converses with Jadabharat. Text number 12. It's always helpful, I say the line read. Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Nachajaya nivapanat grihatva.
Nachajaya nivapanat grihatva.
Nachandasannaiva jalagni suryai.
Nachandasanaiva jalagni suryai.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Nachajaya nivapanat grihatva.
Nachajaya nivapanat grihatva.
Nachandasannaiva jalagni suryai.
Nachandasaiva jalagni suryai.
Vinamahatpadaraja vishekam.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Nachajaya nivapanat grihatva.
Nachajaya nivapanat grihatva.
Nachandasanaiva jalagni suryai.
Nachandasanaiva jalagni suryai.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Nachajaya nirvapanat grihatva.
Nachajaya nivapanat grihatva.
Nachandasanaiva jalagni suryai.
Nachandasanaiva jalagni suryai.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Vinamahatpadarajo
vishekam.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Tapasannayati.
Nachajaya nirvapanat grihatva.
Nachajaya nivapanat grihatva.
Nachandasanaiva jalagni suryai.
Nachandasanaiva jalagni suryai.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Rahuganaitat tapasannayati.
Nachajaya nirvapanat grihatva.
Nachandasanaiva jalagni suryai.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Vinamahatpadarajo vishekam.
Abhishekam.
Raghuganayata tapasanayati na chejayaniva panagratva na chandasana jaragni surye vina mahatpada yogishekam.
Rahugana, O King, Etat, this knowledge,
Tapasya.
by severe austerities and penances, Nayati, does not become revealed, Nam, not, Cha, also, Ijaya, by a great arrangement for worshipping the deity, Nivapanat, or from finishing all material duties and accepting sannyas, Grihat, from ideal householder life, Va, or, Na, no, Chandasa, by observing celibacy or studying Vedic literature, Naiva, no, Jala Agni Suryai, by severe austerity such as keeping oneself in water, in a burning fire, or in the scorching sun, Vina, without, Mahat, of the great devotees, Hara Raja, the dust of the lotus feet, Abhishekam, smearing all over the body. Translation. My dear King Rahugana, unless one has the opportunity to smear his entire body with the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees, one cannot realize the absolute truth. One cannot realize the absolute truth simply by observing celibacy, Brahmacharya, strictly following the rules and regulations of household life, leaving home as a vanaprastha, accepting sannyas, or undergoing severe penances in winter by keeping oneself submerged in water or surrounding oneself in summer by fire and the scorching heat of the sun. There are many other processes to understand the absolute truth, but the absolute truth is only revealed to one who has attained the mercy of a great devotee. Prabhupada pays divine grace to Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Swami Prabhupada. Actual knowledge of transcendental bliss can be bestowed upon anyone by pure devotee. Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atmavakto. One cannot attain the perfection of spiritual life simply by following the directions of the Vedas. One has to approach a pure devotee. Anyavilasasanyam ganakamadyanavrittam. By the grace of such a devotee, one can understand the absolute truth, Krishna, and one's relationship with him. A materialistic person sometimes thinks that simply by executing pious activities and remaining at home one can understand the absolute truth. That is denied in this verse. No one can understand the absolute truth simply by observing the rules and regulations of brahmacharya, celibacy, one has to serve the pure devotee. That will help one understand the absolute truth without fail. Essential verses of the Bhagavatam, essential teachings, very confidential teaching of all the scriptures. Or to speak of even confidential understanding within the confidential bhakti scriptures. So, to perceive, here Srila Prabhupada says something very interesting in his purport. He says, actual knowledge of transcendental bliss can be bestowed upon anyone by pure devotee. So here, this Jagbarat is explaining to King Rahugana about knowledge of the absolute truth. But Srila Prabhupada says knowledge of transcendental bliss. They're one and the same. It's a nice way to phrase it. The impersonalists, they do not understand. They think that the absolute truth is impersonal, and this concept of relishing transcendental bliss, they deny this factor. That's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter. You see this verse describing the Patanjali yoga system. And many people who follow the Patanjali yoga system, even if they're meditating upon the super soul, they take themselves to be, their self and the super soul to be one. But there's no exchange of transcendental bliss by the interaction. That it is an impersonal situation. So, Prabhupada mentions in the purport that by practice of yoga one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the super soul through transcendental mind and intelligence without any misgivings of identifying the self with the super soul. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul and the super soul, and the monists think this to be liberation, but they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali yoga system. There is an actual acceptance of transcendental pleasure. So this is what Prabhupada is saying, this bliss, in the Patanjali system. But the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. Okay? So Prabhupada, in that one sentence, in describing the absolute truth, the supreme knowledge is making it non-different from the concept of transcendental bliss. So just that statement itself justifies the entire impersonalist philosophy in one sentence. Because they don't accept that. They don't accept it because the Prabhupada says the fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. bliss through my senses, in association by meditating on the Supreme Soul, then perhaps I'm a spiritual person with spiritual senses. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualists. So they don't accept it. There's a knower of the Absolute Truth. It's just the Absolute Truth. But in this verse, transcendental pleasure, realised through transcendental senses, is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous component of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras, Purushartha sunyanam gunanam pariprasavaha kavalyam swarupa patishta vat-chitti shakti iti. This chitti shakti, or internal potency, is transcendental. Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end the attempt to become one with the Supreme. This oneness with the Supreme is called kaivalyam by the monist. But according to Patanjali, this kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, who we celebrated his appearance yesterday, in the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affairs is called Chaito Darpana Marjanam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This clearance is actually liberation, or Bhava Maha Davagni Nivapana. The theory of Nirvana, also preliminary, corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, this is called Swarupina Vyavastiti. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms this situation. After Nirvana, or material cessation, there is a manifestation of spiritual activities, or devotional service, to the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, Swarupina Vyavastiti, this is the real life of the living entity. So, we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the blissful nectar of the life, in immortality. So this Maya or illusion is the condition of spiritual contamination by material infection, and liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. So Patanjali also accepts this by the words Kaivalyam Swarupina Pratishtava Chitti Shakti Iti. This Chitti Shakti, or transcendental pleasure, coming back to this bliss, an essential item, is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. So again, this, what Patanjali is saying, is in line with the conclusions Srila Vyasadeva gives of the entire Vedic literatures. And that is Vedanta Sutra 1.1.12, Ananda Mayo Vyasat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by the execution of devotional service for Bhakti Yoga. So Prabhupada, just that one line opening his purport with that statement, actual knowledge of transcendental bliss, which is the, and when we score, in other words, in this verse, we're seeing actual knowledge of transcendental bliss is synonymous with actual knowledge of the Absolute Truth. There's no question of understanding the Absolute Truth, because the Absolute Truth is Sat Chit Ananda. If we understand the Brahman feature, we understand the Sat feature of eternality. If we understand the Chit feature, we understand the feature of eternality, consciousness. But if we understand Sat Chit Ananda, we understand the full manifestation of the Absolute Truth, where the Supreme Personality Godhead, although one, expands into many to increase unlimitedly the transcendental bliss of spiritual life. That is the actual picture of Absolute Truth. So then Prabhupada goes on to say, of course, so this here in this verse, it's saying one can only realize that through devotional service. And then in this verse here, we're saying one can only realize devotional service, how to practice devotional service, and how to attain the goal of devotional service by smearing one's self, entire body, with the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees, in plural. So, now to get and of course, we all have very practical experience of this in the Hare Krishna movement. We also have practical experience of that from Bhagavad Gita. So, for instance, we see that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna revealed to Arjuna, because Arjuna was his devotee, he revealed to Arjuna his universal form. And because those in the same disciplic succession, they were also able to see that universal form. So throughout the universe, so their qualification to also see the universal form was because they were somehow linked to the same disciplic succession as Arjuna. Otherwise, it would not have been revealed to them. So, because Krishna, he always likes to glorify his devotees, he revealed himself in the universal form to Arjuna, and therefore others were able to see. In another practical understanding, we see that Krishna agreed to reveal his forms as the Archamurti, the forms of Radha Krishna, all over the world for Srila Prabhupada. Because Prabhupada is really devotee. Because he agreed to present those forms all over the world to fulfill the devotional service of Srila Prabhupada, therefore we can also see those Archamurtis anywhere in the world. If they had not been revealed to Prabhupada, you can go to any city in the world, you'll not find Radha Krishna. So, not what to speak of Gauratai. Gauratai is very, very confidential. Sri Gauratai is the pastimes of the Lord where Krishna reveals the most confidential aspects of transcendental bliss in the spiritual world. So, but also, if we come and look at the deities, we may still not see Radha Krishna. We may see marble or metal. But because Krishna revealed the full nature of the Absolute Truth to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada presented that in his purports, then we can also see Krishna through beauty by studying Prabhupada's books and practicing the teachings of Prabhupada's books. Then when we look at the deities, we can see there's Krishna. Very cool. Otherwise, even the deities are there, still we will not see. That takes divine vision. Divine vision is the vision of the pure devotees of the Lord. So, the form of the deity of Krishna. So, of course, the universal form of the Lord is, sometimes Prabhupada describes the Bhagavad Gita as a godless Lord. It's an unusual term. In other words, when Arjuna's looking at the universal form, he's thinking, where's my friend Krishna? This form is filled, where's my friend? The devotees, they're not interested in a display of opulence and majesty. They just want the personality of Krishna to be there so they can love him. So the deity form of the Lord in the temples, like the universal form, is actually manifested by the different material elements, but the feature of the Archamurti is that it is a form which is suitable for developing one's love for the Lord by practice. So the Lord actually, he personally appears in his personal feature within the deity to accept the loving services of the devotee. And still, the full nature of the Absolute Truth, as Prabhupada describes here, or transcendental bliss, is found in the very here by engaging in the service of the devotee. One realizes the nature of the Absolute Truth. Here, in the translation, an interesting translation of the word says Ijaya, by the great arrangement of worshipping the deity. So, to worship the deity, we can realize the Absolute Truth. But we can only realize the Absolute Truth when we worship the deity under the directions of the spiritual master. That's the point. If we worship the deity and don't smear our body with the dust of the guru, the pure devotee, that won't be effective. You can do that. There's some benefit, of course, everything in spiritual life there's some benefit. But one may be not able to rise above one's material, the strong material desires that keep one bound in this material world, unless one worships the deity under the guidance of the pure devotee, or in other words, worships the deity and taking the nectarian instructions of the spiritual master and implementing them as a way of smearing the body with the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee, then one will see Krishna. If there's a tinge of bhakti in one's karma yoga, Ashtanga yoga, what have you, jnana yoga, one may Not guaranteed. In the little tinge, one may be able to see the universal form, but there has to be some bhakti. There has to be. Krishna will not even reveal the universal form of the Lord to a devotee, to one, unless there's a tinge of bhakti, a tinge of they've got bhakti means that somehow the association of devotees, they've either unknowingly, unwillingly, or knowingly done some little devotional service. And but to understand the Archamurti, or the deity form of the Lord, one needs a greater degree of bhakti to understand. And but still, the worship of the deities, Prabhupada mentions, is more or less, it's essential for the neophytes. Prabhupada mentions that in the it's a big statement, so I'm going to get some authority. Make a big statement. It's not coming from me. I wouldn't say anything controversial. Let's see. Bhagavad Gita 11. I think it is 52. In the Bhagavad Gita, text 54, in the purport, describes that if one worships as prescribed in the temple, which means that is a chance to progress by offering worship and respect to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For the beginners in devotional service, temple worship is essential, and this is confirmed in the Vedic literature. So this is Tara Upanishad 6.23. Yashadive pada bhakti yatadive tata guru dashaite tita yata pakasante mahapanaha. One who has unflinching devotion for the Supreme Lord and is directed by the spiritual master, in whom he has similar unflinching faith, can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead by revelation. So even to worship the deity of the Lord, it must be done under the spiritual master, who one has as much implicit faith as in that the deity form is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When both of those together, then by revelation, one can perceive the Supreme Personality of Godhead or the Absolute Truth. And it's a process. Again, so not just by deity worship, but by smearing oneself with the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. So, now, in verse 9:11, very famous verse, I don't know this one not by heart. Avijananti mamudha manushintyanamashritam param bhavam vajananto mabhagutam maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. So of course, for persons who are not directed by the spiritual master and the blissful realizations of the Absolute Truth about the personality of Godhead in Prabhupada's books, one does not have that. one will struggle to understand that Krishna can that God can be a person. They're going to struggle to get to the personal concept of, and that if God is a person, he certainly cannot be this little cowherd boy who seems to be this little rascal doing all sorts of mischief in Vrindavan, who's dependent upon Mother Yashoda and running in fear of her. So he certainly cannot be Krishna. So then to have a deity of Krishna, well, Krishna's not even God, God's not even a person, and I'm supposed to worship the deity of Krishna, that doesn't make sense. So very, very, very difficult for people, to come to that platform, even to the platform of deity worship. But these days, the simple way to get around that is to just worship everyone and everything and hope amongst that, somewhere amongst it all, is God. Worship Durga, Shiva, Indra, this Baba, that Baba. Somewhere in amongst all that is sure to be God. Well, God's everything. Maybe if I cover everything, I've covered God. So we'll pop into the Krishna temple, we'll pop into that temple, we'll pop into that temple. Doesn't matter. In the course of a lifetime, somehow or another, we're going to run into God, we're going to do something, and hopefully that's good enough to expand my bank balance. So deity worship, has to be done, by smearing one's body with the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee. Otherwise, even that will not be successful, will not be possible. But therefore, we see that so Prabhupada mentions that So again, coming back to this concept of understanding the impersonal, the absolute truth as expanding this transcendental bliss. The one Lord has expanded into many to expand this transcendental bliss. The absolute truth is not impersonal. So Prabhupada mentions, after revealing this form, right, his two-armed form, his Bharata Rupa, then the four-armed form, then gradually the Krishna form. After revealing this form, Krishna, when petitioned by Arjuna, again assumed his original human form, Manusya Rupam. These different features of the Supreme Lord are certainly not those of an ordinary human being. Some of those who deride Krishna and who are infected with the Mayavadi philosophy quote the following verse from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam 3:29-21 to prove that Krishna is just an ordinary man. So the Mayavadis dare to quote Bhagavatam, although they have no access to poke their nose in them. Aham sarvasya bhuteshu bhutatma vastita sada. That the Supreme is present in every living entity. Okay. So that's there in the Bhagavatam. It's there in the Gita as well. The Supreme is present in every living entity. So I think that how many verses? 18,000 verses in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam? Yes. So they don't matter. There's just this one verse for the Mayavadis. I don't care that it's out of context with the other 18,000 verses, but we've got something. It's like one time, they're so determined. That's why they're Mayavadis. In person, it's a little different. They don't know, they're a little bit more innocent. Mayavadis are more preaching against personalism. They're going out of the way. One time I was distributing books in the morning, Christian, you know, who they also tend to be persons, you know, these days. Jesus, God, God's Jesus, and the Holy Ghost is all just merged into one. They used to have separate identities, but yeah. So anyway, he said, Krishna's a demon. I said, oh, how can you say that? Why do you say that? Oh, it's in the Bhagavad Gita. I said, really? The Bhagavad Gita, show me. So I got a Gita there, I showed him the Gita. He comes to the 10th canto. Amongst the Daitas, I'm Prahlad, the devoted Prahlad. So again, there's 700 verses in the Gita. And he's found one to prove that Krishna is a demon. Anyway, this is a similar thing, but this is what they do. So he says, so that Supreme is present in every living entity. We should better take note of this particular verse from the Vaishnava-Acharyas. Again, let's smear our bodies with the dust of the devotees. Like Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakrabarti the Core, instead of following the interpretation of unauthorized persons who deride Krishna, Jiva Goswami, commenting on this verse, says that Krishna, in his plenary expansion as Paramatma, is situated in the moving and non-moving entities as the supersoul. So any neophyte devotee who simply gives his attention to the Archamurti, the form of the Supreme Lord in the temple, and does not respect other living entities, is uselessly worshipping the form of the Lord in the temple. That's what it means. Again, you know that point that without following deity worship according to the directions of the spiritual master, it can be a useless attempt. It says here, if there, any neophyte devotee, we're talking about devotees in somebody, who simply gives his attention to the Archamurti, the form of the Supreme Lord in the temple, and does not respect other living entities, is uselessly worshipping the form of the Lord in the temple. So then he describes there are three kinds of devotees of the Lord, and the neophyte is in the lower stage. The neophyte devotee, so as we said, deity worship is essential for neophyte devotees. So they must worship the deity, it's essential. The neophyte gives more attention to the deity in the temple than to other devotees. So Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti the Core warns that this sort of mentality should be corrected. A devotee should see that because Krishna is present in everyone's heart as Paramatma, everybody is the embodiment or the temple of the Supreme Lord. So as one offers respect to the temple of the Lord, he should similarly properly respect each and every body in which the Paramatma dwells. Everyone should therefore be given proper respect and should not be neglected. So the process of deity worship is not that we come and just wave a few lamps, make the garlands, and offer some money and some food and so many things. But if we actually want to derive the benefit from deity worship and actually make progress in devotional service, whereby we, by revelation, we understand the absolute truth, which means that we understand that Krishna, Shri Radha Krishna, is the manifestation of the absolute truth. We must follow the directions of the devotees as given in the scriptures. And therefore, to elevate oneself from the neophyte platform to the second-class platform, one has to learn 4 things. Otherwise we remain a neophyte. What are those 4 things that we must practice? different levels, but especially devotees, because this is all about especially devotees, because we want to get the dust of the devotees. So basically, we have to learn how to work, having faith in the spiritual teachings from the spiritual master, which are non-different from the Shastras, and understand that we must accept that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna, and we worship, and He is fully present within the deity form of the Lord. So we worship the Lord with great respect and proper attention according to the details. Then we must also learn how to associate with the three levels of devotees, or we must serve the pure devotees of the Lord. We make friendship with the peers, and of course, there's a few traps in that, because sometimes we jump up, oh, I'm peer with him, or the peers. So we've got to recognise, here's my senior devotee, I'm not their peer, nor am I senior to them. So it takes a bit of practice, a lot of practice. And so recognise and serve the senior devotees, associate with the peers in a very friendly way, sharing, and to look after the innocent or beginning devotees, anyone that may have a little spark like that. That is non-envy. And that is a higher level of deity worship. That is deity worship on a higher level. Because we've gone from understanding, so yes, Krishna is within Krishna is there within the deity, he is there. And that same Krishna, as shown by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna showed this universal form. Look in my body, Arjuna, you will see the entire universe within there, the universal form. Arjuna is looking at the form of Krishna, and he can see within the form of Krishna all the universes there. And then he showed his four-armed form, the vision, the super soul. And repeatedly Krishna says throughout the Gita, that super soul, that is me, in my expansion. That form is coming from me, Arjuna. I am not coming from the visionary form. The universal form is within me, Arjuna. I am not coming from the universe. And here is my original form from which everything is coming. So, one who, by worshipping the deity nicely, under the direction of the pure devotees, and in our movement that especially means under Srila Prabhupada, because these deities manifested to Prabhupada, they're all in his care forever. Doesn't matter, 5,000, 10,000 years, whatever deities manifest, they'll all be manifesting because of Krishna's love for Prabhupada. They're worshipped under his direction, and his direction is presented very clearly in his books, which is the very blissful rendition of the teachings in the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, by doing that, one will come to the next level where one will be able to, Krishna will reveal himself. Yes, I can perceive that that Krishna, he is within the heart of every living entity. Because they have forgotten this, they're suffering. And when they remember this, they're joyful, blissful. And the process is therefore to help them to become Krishna conscious. We see in this last verse of the 11th chapter, Krishna says that. He says, verse 55, "My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation, and who works for me, and who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me." So being friendly to every living being means that if we help them become Krishna conscious, they'll become happy. All their problems solved, they'll go back to God. That's friendly. Don't get more friendly than that. So, and one who takes a risk to do that becomes very dear. Therefore we see why Srila Prabhupada is so dear, because this is the nature of the topmost devotees. This is why they're not topmost because, they've somehow seized that position, like by politics or, corporate manoeuvring. They're topmost devotees because they risk everything to serve Krishna and help the conditioned souls to become Krishna conscious. They will go through any difficulty. And whether there's success or failure or whatever, they don't care. They will serve Krishna with pure love despite anything. They don't care even that they go back to Goloka Vrindavan. Let me stay here if Krishna wants. I will stay here in this world and preach Krishna consciousness and go through all sorts of difficulty if that makes Krishna happy. Just like the Gopis. They offered the dust Krishna wanted dust to fix his headache. No one would give. The devotees wouldn't give. Oh, I will go to hell, I will suffer. And Radha went to the Gopis. Here, buckets of dust. Take. The Radha sang. Fearfully going down. Go to hell. We will happily go to hell if Krishna is happy at that. That's why he's so dear. The love is spotless, unconditional. So, those very, very elevated devotees, they know that that's what Krishna wants. They know exactly what Krishna wants. So, therefore, one learns to, one's understands to serve the deities. If I, with a little further understanding of what Krishna really wants, yes, we can come and offer him an apple every day, and you know what, it's very good. But if we actually see that he's present in the hearts of all living entities, and many are suffering because they have forgotten that, and try to help them, following the program set out by the pure devotees, then Krishna becomes very pleased. In fact, in the Gita he says, if one tries to help people to understand the Gita, there is no one more dear to me than that person, nor will there ever be. So that form of deity worship is a high level. One has to serve the pure devotees. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur puts it like this, that we should serve the pure devotees, the spiritual master, Ultima-Adhikari. So those who follow in the footsteps of Prabhupada, fully surrendered, then we're serving them. Literally, we see them as completely fulfilling the mission of Srila Prabhupada. We give them the same, respect that we give to Prabhupada in that sense, that they are acting exactly how Prabhupada would act. What Prabhupada would do if he was personally here, those pure devotees in this movement, they're also doing that. And so we 100% of the time serve those pure devotees. In that way, we serve Srila Prabhupada as well, simultaneously. 100% of the time. And yet we've got two other categories to go. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says, you serve the Madhyama Adhikaris 66% of the time. That's 166. Spiritual match. And you serve the Kanishta Adhikaris 33% of the time. So quite often we see the Kanishta Adhikaris, when they learn to serve devotees, they don't just sit there and Founder-Acharya mates. But that's not the process. If they don't serve the pure devotees 100% of the time, they're not actually following the process properly. If 100% of the time is given to Founder-Acharyas, associating, hearing from them, offering them things like that, that's not the process. 100% of the time to the pure devotees, 66% of them we should seek out. You know, we don't always have the association of the pure devotees. Mostly we have the association of the Founder-Acharyas, and that takes most of our days. And we should serve. Founder-Acharyas means they're preachers generally. Generally they're preaching Krishna consciousness. Wherever they go, they see Krishna and they help people become Krishna conscious. Most of our association is there. But within that, while devotees are serving the mission of Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, in the association of their peers, preaching Krishna consciousness, then all the conditioned souls, you know, all the innocent people who have an opportunity to take their Krishna consciousness, they're constantly giving so much shelter, helping them to come to the shelter of Krishna consciousness. As described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that as the devotees are splashing about in the ocean of nectar, and some of these drops, you know, go here and there like that, and those drops of nectar are liberating all the conditioned souls. It was just like yesterday, we had the festival of Gorpanima. So the devotees, somehow or another, they tune into that festival of Gorpanima, either in their homes, you know, many devotees have the murtis with Sri Gurmatai in their homes, or a picture. And also maybe tuning into the local temple. And as they're splashing about in that nectar, some of the innocent people come along to see, oh, what is happening? And that nectar splashes on them. And in that way, they become liberated. So, therefore, this, as we see, central to deity worship is actually smearing the dust of the devotees all over one's body by helping the younger devotees and by executing Srila Prabhupada's mission and helping the younger devotees. We're smearing the dust of all the great devotees who want that mission to be done. So by helping the younger devotees, we're smearing ourselves in the dust of all the devotees who are pushed on this mission. We're getting all their blessings, all the acharyas. Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta. I had this dream once. I was sitting in the kitchen, and when I turned to look, there's Prabhupada, and there was Bhaktivedanta and Gaurkishore Das Bhagavati, Bhaktivedanta and Gaurkishore Das Bhagavati. I was looking, I was thinking, oh, they're all very happy, of doing some little service like that. It was a strange dream. But all of them, Vishwanath Chakravarti at the core, Narottam Das the core, the six Goswamis of Vrindavan, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Madhavendra Puri, Śrīmati Radharani, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda, Advaita-acharya, Gadadhar, Srinivasacharya, all of them. One time Prabhupada said, you go out in Sankirtan, and so one day you turn around there with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this, you'll meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you'll understand. If you're preaching Krishna, if you're trying to serve the deity by preaching Krishna consciousness, you will definitely feel the presence of the personality of Godhead directly with you. direct experience, you'll understand. What just happened, that happened because Krishna's here. Right here. Otherwise, how does that? That's beyond the laws of anything. The only way that particular thing happened in my life is because Krishna is personally present. Krishna is perceived by revelation that even, as mentioned in the Gita also, when Krishna was personally present, Prabhupada says there's only a few who actually understood, here's the Supreme Person of God. They're looking at Krishna, right in front of them, so many. And there's a few understand. Oh, there's Krishna, this is the Supreme Person of God. So they're looking directly at him. Srila Prabhupada, the preacher, Srila Prabhupada, they understand Krishna, he's saying, Krishna is writing these books. He's making me write in this particular way. Krishna is here, he's writing these. Every page, Prabhupada feeling Krishna. One time, someone went to Prabhupada's room late at night, they saw the lights were on, there was this glow coming. They appeared in the door, and streams of tears are just coming out of Srila Prabhupada's eyes as he's, over the books. This, every page. Prabhupada said these books are his ecstasy, because at every page Krishna is manifest there, by revelation. So, and of course, then if we follow those, practices of being very careful how we deal with devotees. Therefore, on the festival days, we worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but one of the main things we do is smear our bodies with the dust of the pure devotees. If we really want to enter into, we've come to the temple of Shri Radha Krishna, we want to, feel the presence of the deity within our lives, you smear your body with the dust of the lotus feet of the devotees. Otherwise, if our behaviour with the devotees is very rough, whether they be a neophyte that we should have actually helped in Krishna consciousness and we've disturbed, feeling we're very proud, or our peers, instead of sharing and cooperating in a friendly mood where there's some, let's say, envious competition going on, which is disruptive to one's service, or we are neglectfully not even willing to hear the words of some of our senior devotees, because we're so proud that we feel that, I'm either your peer or I'm your senior, I will not hear you. Whatever, so many mistakes. If our behaviour is like that, and then we're so proud, yes, like a neophyte that waves some lamps and give me some flowers. And of course, so much trouble with the devotees as I wander around, then the deities are not very happy with it. That is, presented there. The deities are not very happy. They're very, they'll accept your service, they're very kind. But if we think that from that type of service, the full revelation of the presence of the personality of Godhead is going to manifest blissfully and ecstatic in our life, one is completely wrong. That won't happen. Then, by following that, we come to the level of the Uttama-Adhikari, and the Uttama-Adhikari, of course, by their offenceless service to the distribution of the holy name of the Lord, where they are beyond the critical mentality and offensive behaviour to the Lord or the deity or the devotees, because they are able to chant the holy name of the Lord purely, then the potency of the holy name potencies, and the potency of the holy name completely takes over and fully takes charge of that devotee's life under the protection of the spiritual energy, whereby they always perceive the presence of the Lord. They're always getting this Buddha yoga or inspiration from within the heart, exactly what to do and exactly what not to do, exactly how to treat this devotee, from all different levels, exactly what to say, to be able to perceive the presence of the Lord and His direction in the sphere of all one's activities. So that the pure devotees, they also worship the deity, but when they walk out the door and walk out onto the streets, the deities that in the temple, they're seeing in everyone's heart, and they're behaving the same way as they would in the temple. Not that we walk from the temple room even down to the kitchen, and by the time we get in the kitchen, our interactions are completely different with devotees than what they are here. What the speaker haven't even got out the street. So these are the different levels. So therefore, this is why it says that the absolute truth is only revealed to one who has attained the mercy of great devotee. I'll leave it there if anyone has any questions or comments on this. Good? Yeah. So I should have been on.
So thank you very much for a nice class, Prabhu. My question is about deity worship. What is the scope of deity worship in the temple? Is it just on the altar, or everything we do which is connected to deities, obviously? But then, what kind of mindset we have to be absorbed in doing services, even though we are clearing the bins over there, or opening something?
Yeah, good question. So, what is the scope of deity worship in the temple? So, there are 64 items of deity worship, and those different items of deity worship include, say, the 4 regular principles: no eating meat, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex. So that from morning to night, if we're practicing that, then we are keeping ourselves in a purified state, that whatever we are going to do for deity worship, such as cleansing the floor, painting, cooking, is an offering with the basic principles of purity as given by Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. So, in other words, for instance, if a devotee who has full faith in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam and follows the 4 regular principles and chants 16 nice rounds without offence, and comes and cleans the toilets, and you compare that to the devotee who may be worshipping the deity in the deity room, who's not following the 4 regular principles, who's offensive to devotees, that person cleaning the toilets is doing a higher standard of deity worship. And, it's unfortunate, but I have seen that. I've known devotees that because they stopped the hearing and chanting process with devotees, with Prabhupada's books, and Prabhupada mentions this again and again in his books, the deity worship become like a heavy stone burden around their neck. And they've told me personally, not here, told me personally, I hate to go into the deity room. It's like, literally, it was just a terrible thing, because that process of hearing and chanting had disappeared. The ability, therefore, to follow the regular principles disappeared. They're worshipping the deity and getting getting so much respect from the whole community. But they told me personally, I had to be there. And you get some devotee, no one's even looking at them, following the principles nicely, nice behavioural devotee, no one cares about them. But they're actually better situated. And those devotees are still here. And that Pujari and others I've seen like that disappeared. So, yes, deity worship is not just getting into that, covered a deity room and being seen by the community through those, few opportune services. Deity worship, deity worship can be done, anywhere. The deity worship means that if you come into the temple, or say you couldn't even get to the temple, but you remember how when you came into the temple a couple of days ago when you could, and you remembering those deities in your heart, and never forget those deities. So Radha, every time I'm doing something, I can't stop thinking of the beautiful form of Radha. You're doing deity worship by remembering them. Actually, all the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness are to serve two rules. Always remember Krishna and never forget him. If we're chanting Hare Krishna and we're not even thinking of the mantra or hearing it, or we're worshipping the deity and as soon as we leave the temple we just forget them until the next time we come to the temple. It's that standard deity worship. It may attract a lot of praise, but it's not, especially in the big crowds, but actually a higher standard of deity worship is a devotee who may have even less contact with the deities, like Srila Prabhupada. But, he left Vrindavan to go to the west. But he never ever forgot Radha Krishna for a moment. That means he was never out of the presence of Radha Krishna in Vrindavan, even when he went to America. The deity, Prabhupada said, this temple in Melbourne, I think it was in Vrindavan, he said, don't think you're in Melbourne. If you're in Melbourne, in the temple there, don't think you're in Melbourne. You're in Vrindavan if you're in that consciousness. Which means that you can be in the temple and still be in Melbourne consciousness. Or you can be in the temple and be in Krishna consciousness. You can be out of the temple and be in Radha Vallabha Melbourne temple consciousness, which is not different from being in the temple. Or you can be in mind. Prabhupada was in the middle of New York, but he was in Vrindavan, never ever left it. So, these are not, this, as Krishna's form, although he appears like an ordinary person, that form of Krishna is all pervading. It's the absolute truth. It's everywhere, within, without. The Dharma of the Lord, including the temples, they're non-different from Krishna. They're all pervading on the spiritual platform. They're not limited by time and space. Does that mean because Radha and Krishna are in this temple room and we've got them locked up, that when we walk out, only the people in this room are with Radha Krishna? And then Radha Vallabha, and then if Radha Vallabha are not confined to this room and we're outside, they can be with us. And then Radha Vallabha are with us. In fact, therefore a devotee sees the Lord within the heart of every living entity. In the Gita, Prabhupada mentions, when a devotee looks and sees the he sees Krishna. We know that in every living entity that Krishna appears as the form of Vishnu. But when we look, we don't see Vishnu because we can only think of Krishna, we just see Krishna. We see Radha. So you see the Hanuman with that shirt, like that, open up his heart. Is it Vishnu? No, it's Ram. And you see Hanuman. So if Radha are always in the heart, then what's the question of not being able to do deity worship? So, but again, these revelations are all in Prabhupada books. If we smear our body with the dust of let's get rid of dust from these books, Prabhupada's nectar, smear our body, our hearts, our minds with that, then all those revelations will be there by Prabhupada's grace. Okay? Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Gangeswar Prabhu ki.